You're listening to Friends with Rose, a conversation about facing diversity and supporting Black Americans in the field of child life on the Child Life On Call podcast. Hi, and welcome to the Child Life On Call podcast. When your child is sick, the whole world seems to stop in its tracks. Plans and priorities change, and your number one job becomes figuring out how to get your child well again. For some of us, rest, medications, and relaxation can do the trick. But for others, it takes more. It takes countless doctor appointments, invasive medical testing, therapy, surgeries, the list goes on, and then you still may not have all of the answers or results you were hoping for. This podcast features parents of children that have an illness or medical condition and gives them a place to share their own journeys and experiences. We will talk about the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, but one thing seems to remain the same. Children are resilient and teach us more about ourselves and the world than we could ever imagine. Thank you so much for lending a listening ear and opening up your heart to these families and this podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 40th episode of the Child Life On Call podcast. This little passion project of mine has introduced me to so many inspiring people and opened up my heart and brain in so many ways that I could not even begin to imagine in 2017 when this podcast first began. I had thought a lot about making this 40th episode something special, and I'm so honored to say that today this is something incredibly special that I am so honored to share with you. Let me be the first to stand up and say that I have not actively done my part to reach diverse families on this podcast. Out of almost 35 families, less than a handful are something other than white. It makes me want to puke. It also makes me want to change so badly. In the wake of George Floyd's murder, the world has been turned on its head like it should have been. It shouldn't have taken this long for protest and change. It's scary, it hurts to admit, it can feel overwhelming to look inward at the way we've been living our lives, but we've got to do it. I messed up and I should have easily looked at the disparity that I myself had been creating on this podcast. It would have been easy for me to reach out, find more Black moms, more people of color to represent their issues, because what we've learned is that no matter what kind of diagnosis or illness that your child may have, we're all looking for support and we can all find camaraderie amongst each other despite the color of our skin. But that's all changing now. I have a platform and people and mothers and fathers and hospital healthcare workers who are listening, and now it's my turn to listen. Today, I am so excited to bring to you Meg and Jess. These two are relatively new to the podcast world, but they bring so much joy and laughter and fun and authenticity that I'm obsessed with them already, and I've never even met them in real life before. They are called Friends with Rose, and they host a podcast called Don't Worry About My Hair. I'm so honored to share with you my conversation with these two amazing women so that we can learn to grow as child life specialists, people in the healthcare field, and humans. Thanks so much for listening.
My name is Megan. I work currently as a nurse at a large major children's hospital in the Philadelphia region. I'm from Texas and lived a little bit in Los Angeles, kind of moved all around, but I have a degree in nursing and then my master's degree in child life. So just passionate about children in the hospital in general and how we can reduce stress.
And I'm Jess Whittington. I work at the same hospital as Megan, and that's where we met. I'm a child life specialist, and I'm dual child life specialist recreation therapist. So I got my degree in recreation therapy at Temple University, and then I went and I worked as a rec therapist for 5 years, and then I went back and got a fellowship to do child life because I always wanted to be dual. It's just very hard to find dual internships. So I got a fellowship and got my child life cert, and now I've been a CLS for 5 years, and I've worked with the rehab population. I'm very passionate about rehab, and I'm very passionate about dual cert. So that's my little quip there.
That's cool. So Megan, are you working as a child life specialist or a nurse right now?
So right now I'm working as a nurse. When I first came to this hospital, I was working as a child life specialist for about the first 3 years of my career at this hospital. And for the past 10 months, I jumped back into nursing. So funny enough, I started child life in dialysis, which I was not expecting at all. It's just a really underserved population in general.
Mm.
And I developed a true passion. I know that's our buzzword right now, a passion, but I really love that population. So going back into nursing, I had to orient on a different unit, but I'm actually starting back on dialysis as a nurse tomorrow. So that's exciting.
Oh
So
my
exciting.
God. It'll be so cool to go back into a unit like as a different clinical role and just see what it
Yeah.
feels like. And so to start off our interview, I wanted to do a little bit of fun. And this is called This or That. And so I just want y'all to tell me right off the bat which one you would choose. So day shift or night shift?
Day shift.
Ooh, days.
Okay, that was easy. Are you a coffee drink or are you an energy drink person?
Oh,
Tea?
I like
Is
tea.
that an option?
Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna write coffee or tea, but I was like, tea, Katie. I was like, you're so not cool. People are drinking 5-hour energies these days.
People are. You're right. There are people that I've seen with that, and also people live and like love coffee, like
They
real
do.
serious.
It's
And I
like,
feel
not
silly
me.
when I'm like, no, thank you. I've got my green tea.
okay, good. Okay,
Yes.
you're tea people. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, here's a good one. Are you like trendy scrub styles, like the new fake stuff, or do you go old school?
We had no options.
I wear, what are the pants? They're khakis. I wear khakis.
You wear khakis?
I wear khakis. I wear like, I feel like I get made fun of because I don't wear scrubs as much.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a khaki cargo pant.
Okay.
Are cargo pants still cool?
I mean, they hold stuff, right?
Oh gosh, that means no.
What they don't hold is fashion, okay?
Okay, yeah, got it. Noted. I don't wear cargos.
And what about you? Like as a nurse, do you have to stick to a certain scrub style or?
Yeah, so now we have a uniform. A couple years back, it was you could wear like literally any t-shirt you wanted in scrub bottoms, but now we have a standardized uniform. We have a few options of like different styles of pants, but nothing to write home about.
Okay.
Just regular.
All right, next question. If you had to work one of these holidays, which would it be? Thanksgiving or Christmas?
Christmas.
Oh.
Thanksgiving is too big in my family. It has to be Christmas.
I'm doing Thanksgiving because Christmas you get a lot of the calls.
Yeah.
You do.
Yes.
You do.
Okay, and so for your lunch break, are you like lunch alone, don't bother me, or a lunch in a group setting?
Alone.
I knew you were gonna say that. I knew you were gonna say that. Meanwhile, I'm calling like 7 different groups.
Yeah. All right. So I know there's like, it's like you don't actually always get to choose this, but hospital mask or make your own.
Oh, if I had the option, it would be my own, to have a little bit of style and flair and something different.
If there was a choice, make your own would be better.
I know. They're like, you can put the one you make on top of your regular mask. I'm like,
oh,
no.
That's nice. You can do that.
Yeah.
That's too much.
It's too heavy.
Oh, to breathe.
All right. And then last, this or that, clogs or sneakers?
Sneakers.
Sneakers.
All right. See, I'm unfashionable because I still do clogs. Oh, I really
people love them though.
They do.
It makes me taller. I don't know. Just like, it's a thing.
It's a thing. It's okay.
Awesome. Well, thank y'all for playing that little game with me. And then I wanted to get started because I've really been looking at myself in this podcast, and I've done a terrible job of reaching out to diverse people and families and having them share their experiences. And until I really look at myself and I'm honest about that, I'm not going to be able to change. So I wanted to speak with you guys today just to get some of your input about some of our families in the hospital and things they may be experiencing or feeling, or just some insight you guys have. And that's why I'd love to have you on the podcast today. So if you're okay, I'll go ahead and get started with some of our questions. Have you received any feedback or comments from Black families regarding challenges due to limited diversity of the hospital staff? I know that's a big question.
For those of you who can't see us, Jess and I are both Black women. And here in Philadelphia, we do have a pretty diverse population that we serve at the hospital. Working in areas that I've worked with, there have been a high population of Black patients. And so, yeah, our patients and families definitely can recognize that there is a lack of diversity in some staff. With that, we've, not necessarily, I can't say I've necessarily heard commentary, but I feel there's like a natural level of comfortability when you enter a room with someone who looks like you. So that could be, or sounds like you, or just shares the same culture. If you're a Russian immigrant and you moved here and you notice the doctor has a Russian last name, right? And they come into your room, there's already a level of comfortability. You may not know anything about them. They may not have family that's been to Russia in the past 25 years, but there's a level of comfort of, okay, I see that we have shared commonalities. So I think for a lot of patients and families, when we walk in, it's something that's like, okay, now they can take a couple layers off that they don't have to explain, because I probably have a natural understanding of whatever it is they're going through. It might not be, diagnosis based, but at least I can have some more of a cultural perspective of what's kind of going on in that family.
I don't think that I've received specific feedback. I think there's something to be said about being able to look at somebody that you might be able to offhand assume has the same experiences as you. So I think when we do go into rooms with Black families, whether I did my fellowship in the ED, and thinking about working with walking into a room with a Black family and them seeing me, and then kind of like sometimes there's just this like removal of a veneer. And then I think on the other end, like for myself as a professional, there probably is too, because there is a thing called code switching, where I kind of talk a certain way when I'm with certain people. And it's kind of like, I think people kind of think of this when they're with maybe you're from the South. I am not. But I think like people that have moved to the North from the South, where like when they go home to the South, their accent comes out a little thicker. They start saying bless your heart a little bit more. So I think I do the same thing when I'm with like families that might relate to my culture, might relate to Black culture. I might drop a couple G's like on words, like instead of saying going, I'm saying I'm going in there. Like, just certain things that I would say. I think other families feel like they can drop their veneer too. So I think it hasn't necessarily been certain feedback, but I definitely can get the vibe of feeling a little bit more connection with somebody who might have gone through similar experiences or might understand certain things a little bit better. That's definitely been my experience. And I've definitely gotten feedback. I worked with a family before that the daughter had an oncology diagnosis and was losing her hair. And they were a Black family. And, Child Life, we work with this all of the time, where we talk about like hair loss and what the resources are. But one thing that stuck with me, I worked with this family probably about 4 years ago. And one thing that stuck with me was, we had been working on this for a while, and the mom pulled me aside and was like, it's just hard to explain to other people what Black hair means to Black girls, and that hair loss is really hard. And that was kind of hit me, because I was like, girl, I know, you're right. And like, so I think there's just certain things that you don't have to explain when you've grown up as a Black child. And for these Black parents to have to maybe constantly explain, even just like, no, my daughter doesn't need to wash my hair every day for ADLs or that kind of thing. That's been my experience. So it's not necessarily specific feedback. It's just that relatability, and that veneer they can drop when they're with somebody that might have similar experiences.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah, that's great.
good job. Good answer.
Sorry.
It's like, it's emotional. I want to ask a follow-up question, and that's like, I don't have a lot of Black staff at my hospital, and I don't
Mhm.
want families to miss out on that comfortability of feeling like they can let their guard down. You know, I think as
Mhm.
specialists, that is our job no matter what room we walk into. We want to be that safe person for them. You know, it's just not something that we can do, but I want to be a good listener. I want to be active. I want to be aware of that stuff, and also connect them to people who can understand it, right? Because I'm not going to always be the one who gets it and can support them, but maybe I can find somebody else who can. So that's good for me to learn about, and thanks for that answer.
Yeah.
That was word vomit. Sorry about that.
Oh no, that was good. That was
No,
good.
you're good. I think the key there is like what you're doing now, which is, humility and really listening to families, because even if, let's say, there's nobody that has the same skin tone or anything like that around, like there might still be people that people will feel more comfortable with, and just being able to kind of listen to that family's needs, which we're all trained to do as child life specialists, but yeah, really, really tuning in and taking your time and not dismissing families, and to be able to provide them the best resources is just a good starting place.
And I think in listening, I mean, like you said, like I've had experiences. I mean, like I said, I've been at this hospital now for 5 years, and I've worked with the same team, which is a blessing, and I love my team. But asking and like you said, finding the people that might be able to relate. I work on a rehab, so a lot of times we're dealing with ADLs. And I remember one time one of the OTs came up to me and said, "Hey, I talked to this patient about doing an ADL tomorrow," which is an activity of daily living. So they do showers, dressing, teeth brushing, grooming, everything that they would be doing to teach a kid how to get ready for the day. And she said to me, she was like, "So I was talking to this patient, and they got kind of apprehensive, like more apprehensive than usual when we talked about washing her hair. And I didn't know if this was something she had talked about with you, or if there's something you could understand or teach me." And this was probably about 1.5 years ago. And I was like, "Oh, well, thank you for asking. I'm glad you asked that, because she has braids and she has like braid extensions. And we as Black people don't wash our braid extensions. Maybe you wash it a certain amount of time, maybe every 2 weeks. Some braids you can't wash. So like there's different types of hair." And like I went into this whole explanation. We don't need to get into it here. But I thought it was like admirable that she didn't just say to the patient or make that patient be uncomfortable, because we can
Right.
read kids, and child life specialists, we can read when a kid seems a little more fearful of something we said, and we can kind of dive deeper. And I think I was appreciative of her recognizing the apprehension without saying, "Well, why don't you want to take a shower?" Like
Right.
without jumping to conclusions, and going to a person that might be able to connect with them. I mean, fortunately, I work with all of the patients on our unit, so she knew I worked with them as well. But being able to acknowledge, like, there was some apprehension there. I don't know what it was about. Can you help me? And like being able to ask those questions and not feeling like, well, that person just doesn't want to take showers, and that, they need to wash their hair, so they just need to get up and do it. But acknowledging that and being able to ask those questions. And then she was able to go back to that patient and say, "Hey, we're going to do this ADL today. Is there something that can make it more comfortable for you?" Without saying anything about, the hair or anything. And then that patient said, "My mom brought me in a shower cap," which was something that OT had never heard of, which is a cap to go over your hair to keep it dry. So she had found her own way. But like even just her asking and having that dialogue, they got to that point where they could figure out how to help. So I think, like you said, being able to know where to ask and being comfortable asking, and not feeling like it's going to be a stupid question or I don't need to ask that question, because it can help our patients and families in the long run.
Yeah, it seems like even shower caps would be a super simple thing for us to have next to our shampoo and deodorant, that other stuff that we hand out. And it's like,
Yeah.
just make it available.
Yeah. Just make it
Mhm.
available.
Mhm.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about child life in this next question, and your nursing perspective is helpful too, and rec therapy, but my experience is child life, so that's a little bit what I'm interested in. What's been one of the most challenging, or what is a challenging thing about being a Black woman in a predominantly white profession?
Ooh,
Big question.
I'll say big question. For me, when I initially first started Child Life, I didn't have a good like frame of reference of what hospitals it was at, who was a part of it, etc. So it wasn't until I got to my master's program, and then from there started having to do practicums and internship interviews, etc., that I really got a better scope of what the field looks like on a larger scale. So it was a little bit surprising to me looking at the population of child life specialists. And then I can't lie, it was a little bit disappointing because I was like, man, if we're, in America servicing all American children here, well, I know child life is global, but I'm just talking about from my experience. It just is not reflective of our country, right? So we know that this profession is mostly young white women. And I was like, well, where are the men at? Where are the older child life specialists at? Where are the child life specialists of color? And so I just found it really difficult to connect with other child life specialists of color because I didn't even know if there were any that existed. So one of the biggest challenges for me was just like, one, finding that out, and then two, from there, feeling like we could create a space to have more diversity within this field. Now, I know within the past couple of years, the ACLP has made some moves in that, and they're now offering a diversity scholarship, et cetera. And I think that's necessary. Like, we have to have a diverse field that really can represent the children that we're servicing, to provide appropriate balance of different types of people within the field.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's harder. I think it's nice. It honestly, it was nice that Child Life requires you to do so much field work because it gives you a heads up before you get into a career that this is going to be the groups you work with that probably are going to be encountering. I think one of the ways is, I think the challenge is that Child Life is not well known already. I mean, I think in general, all child life specialists always say they're constantly telling somebody what child lifing actually is. So yes. I think that's a start. I know there's been a push for like child life workshops where child life professionals are going around and educating people in the teaching or people in colleges or emerging freshmen in colleges. They're providing education about what child life is to people maybe interested in nursing, maybe interested in teaching and psychology, just to let them know, like, hey, if this is the area you're interested in, have you heard of child life? Which is great. I know our hospital does this child life workshop, and we outreach to people in education programs, psychology programs in local high schools. We just reach out in general, but like the colleges, we reach out to those schools specifically in those programs. But I think also thinking about how are we reaching out to HBCUs, which are historically Black colleges and universities, where this might not be talked about as much. And we know that there's, people that are also there for schooling about psychology, education, and those kind of things. How are we reaching out to schools in like major cities that might be predominantly Black, predominantly Latinx, predominantly any other race? And I think thinking about, we know child life is not well known and we want to expand the field in general, but how can we expand the field in areas that might not have access to resource to participate in these seminars all the time? Like, how are we actually expanding the knowledge about what we have to offer and what our field is in general?
Yeah, absolutely.
As you said that, sorry, I keep talking.
I want to be quiet.
No, it just as you were talking, it made me think of,
oh my gosh.
What?
Oh, I thought we were frozen. Okay, keep going.
No. I was like,
it's telling me my internet connection is unstable. Keep going.
Oh, okay. You might be unstable.
I'm unstable.
So as you were talking, Jess, it just made me think of an internship experience. So I remember hearing in school and in internship, like, you're a child life specialist, you need to be a blank slate. You need to be a blank slate. Like, this was just repeated over and over again. And then I'd gotten some feedback that I talk a lot with my hands, which I do. And some other little pieces of feedback that I'm not going to say they didn't sit right with me, but they were just a little bit like unsettling a little bit, because I'm like, some people talk with their hands. That's part of their own family culture or ethnic culture, whatever it is. I'm not going to say that Black people talk with their hands, because that's not necessarily true. But for me, it was just like, why do I necessarily need to be a completely blank slate? And so when I had an intern last year, I was telling her that, like, that's the way that I was trained. But once I got into the field, I was like, no. Now, I'm not coming into a party with a party hat and being my loud self if it's a serious situation, obviously. I know how to tailor it and turn the volume up and down, if you will. But I don't believe that. I believe that as professionals, yes, you still have a little bit of your personality, and you can bring that in. You don't have to be vanilla, and I don't mean that as a euphemism for being white. I mean as a standard base that you just add toppings to. I'm strawberry, okay? So I can come in a little bit strawberry. Yeah. So I that was something that I just felt was like, as a child life specialist, we need to remember that everybody comes with culture, whether that's family culture or ethnic culture. Not that you need to push or impose that on other people, but I don't think it's necessarily necessary that you become a totally blank slate.
Well, yeah, we're not robots, you know?
Yeah.
No.
Robots providing psychosocial care.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that, yeah, that's an interesting experience that you had. I'm sorry that it was explained to you in that way, but you have just so beautifully shown us that, like, the colors of people that we are and our feelings. And I mean, even as a woman, like, we're told a lot to kind of like simmer down, you know, don't share your feelings too much. Don't cry in front of families. I have to tell you, like, I let that role go a few years ago. And I'm not sobbing in front of families, but if I'm having an emotional connection, it's not about me. But if I have a tear fall, I'm not going to feel shame about that.
Right.
We're humans with humans, and no need to be a blank slate, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
While I know you don't represent your entire race, like I don't represent mine, what would you like for white clinical staff to know, change, do things differently? You know, we talked a little bit about listening, asking questions, looking inward. But I'm trying to learn, so I don't know if you have any advice about that.
I think, kind of like we said earlier, like, just not being afraid to ask questions, not being afraid to admit that you don't get something or you don't understand something, because I might not get it either, but at least if we can have a dialogue about maybe what we know to be true from our own experience, and then maybe we can combine that with what you know about this family or this experience for them, or how this hospitalization has gone, or things like that, that might be helpful. But I also think not being afraid to speak out if you notice something happening that you don't think is right. This week has brought up a lot of conversation with my own unit team about just, you know, acknowledging when in meetings, why are we calling a parent difficult and we're not calling another parent difficult, and like acknowledging that, you know, medical literacy is challenging. And I think I've had families where I'm not only prepping the patient, I'm prepping the parent, and just having that patience, because sometimes everybody doesn't have the same resources as everybody else. I think definitely realizing that disparities in health in the Black community are extremely different than those in the white community, and really recognizing, I think there's been a lot of conversation about, you know, why are certain families coming in more often than others? Why are there's a huge Black population of patients with sickle cell, and really acknowledging, like, this is tough and this is sad, and like really realizing if something is called out in a meeting or somebody says something in your presence, having the comfort to say, oh wait, that didn't really sound right, I hear what you're saying is this, is that what you meant? Because we need to have a conversation. And being able to call things out, because I think, kind of like you said, we don't represent our whole race, but in times where you're one of few and you want to call something out, it's hard to not be looked at as being the difficult Black person. Like, everything's not about race, is what I've been told before. Everything's not about that. But realizing it might be, and it might be perceived that way to me. And if it's being perceived that way to me as the only Black person in the room, I don't have another person I could ask. So then I feel like I'm being outcasted. So really acknowledging, like, well, tell me, what did I just say? What did I just say that came across as that I'd like to know? Or really stepping back and accepting that, even if it's not coming out of a bad place, if someone says something that sounds a little triggering or a little harsh of a criticism, then me being able to say, ooh, whoa, why did you say that? Like, let's think about it. Like, being able to feel comfortable calling people out, because we can't learn if we don't know that what we're doing is not appropriate and that is not right. I think that's going to be a big thing that would help, because like I said, when I'm in those rooms by myself and I hear somebody say something that might be tailored to, this family, all they eat is fried food. I don't understand. Like, I'm telling them to stop coming in. This kid's on track to obesity. All they're eating is fried food. They don't know how to eat right. And I'm like, well, wait, I eat a lot of fried food in my family. We eat big meals together, and these are the big meals we eat together. Like, thinking about how we can have conversations and really support people of color if they are saying, hey, wait a minute, this sounds like it might be something that's a little coming from a place of implicit bias. Really having the comfort with saying that and helping support your colleagues of color, your Black colleagues, or, I feel like a lot of times we hear like Arabic, I've had this conversation where Arabic families have so many nannies. Oh my God, why do they have so many nannies? Shouldn't somebody be here watching that family? Like, ooh, why are we saying that? Like,
Yeah.
And feeling comfort in saying, whoa, easy. Like, this person has a lot on their plate. They have the resources to have a nanny. This nanny does this. Like, really calling it out when you see it, so that if someone else does call it out, they're not feeling alone by trying to help somebody learn.
Great. That's a great response.
That was a lot.
It was a lot, but I think it was very well said, because I have very minimal to add to that. I think it's important. What I've been hearing from a lot of people, especially this week, is that I don't know what to say, and it might be hard for some people to strike a balance between knowing about a culture in generalizations and having some background knowledge, so you at least have a foundation, and then how do you take that and then not paint everybody with the same paintbrush? So, what I advise people is, if you have the opportunity to really get to know a patient and family, let's say you work in a unit like rehab or somewhere where they have a longer stay, really utilize that to get specifics on that family, because that's going to help you advocate for them better. If you don't, let's say you're working in the emergency department, you have a quick turnover, then some of that foundational general information, like I said, will at least give you some information potentially about what the family's dealing with in their culture. So yeah, I've heard the same things on my unit of, we keep telling these patients to eat and drink XYZ, and why aren't they doing it? And I've had to explain that too. They may not have the same resources you do. And then once I get to know the family, I now know for sure they don't have the same resources or access to healthy food, or access to rides to get here for their appointment on time, right? So now I know them, and I can use that as a fact. It's not a generalization. So I just want to be kind of clear with that, of like, of that we don't want to tokenize, and we don't want to necessarily automatically lump somebody into something, but we do want to have that background knowledge of that. Yes, Black people have been disenfranchised. Black people have been discriminated against, and depending on what city you're in, there might just be slight differences on some of that data, but kind of knowing that underneath it all is, I think, going to be very helpful.
Absolutely. It reminds me a lot of just child life in general. We're kind of used to having to step up and advocate for things, and this should be no different. This should be part of our language. And I am guilty of standing mounds where a doctor's like, all they're eating are tortillas and rice, no wonder. And wow, I mean, those are definitely times where I could have and should have stood up. And it's just time we stop being silent. It's just, that's over. Okay. So that's
Yeah.
Period.
and that was, we should have said something, but now we know better.
Yeah.
And so now
For
it's
sure.
time to stand up and say that. So, thank you guys so much for that input, because those are all valuable things that we can start implementing today.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I just have goosebumps.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you'll have a podcast because you're so eloquent.
We like
We
to
be
talk
talking.
a lot. Yeah.
All right, so I want to close out. I want you guys to tell us about where we can hear more of you, who you are, talk about your podcast. Where can we follow you on Instagram? And if people have questions or want to reach out, when and can they do that?
Yeah. So I'll put what I can remember in here. So we have a podcast. We're known as Your Friends with Froze, Jess and Megan.
Hey.
Woo! And our podcast is called Don't Worry About My Hair. It started, ironically enough, because we do get questions in general in community, in society, everywhere, not just at the hospital, about our hair a lot. Because sometimes it's curly, sometimes it's straight, sometimes we have braids, sometimes there's a fro, sometimes there's all of things going on. And I feel like as I said earlier, Black hair is a very big topic in Black communities in general. But don't worry about my hair. Like, we have things to say. We have experiences besides our hair, and we want to just share our perspective on life in general. So you can find our podcast, Don't Worry About My Hair, on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts. And we're on Instagram, our Friends with Froze. We don't talk about child lifing as often as I think we do, probably because we do it all the time.
We don't talk about it much.
Yeah. But
we just talk about like fun, relatable stuff that we're going through.
Yes.
We're both in our 30s. You know, city living. We're just talking about stuff like that.
Or some of us live in the burbs.
Okay. Yeah. Some of us live in the burbs, honey.
Yes.
Some of us are married people. So yeah, we have some similarities, some differences, and we just talk about life in general. We have a good time. We do.
Yeah.
So we hit the fun topics, and then we hit the harder topics too, like talking about race and you know, the different challenges that we all have in life.
Yeah. I think this was a really good one for talking about that. And it was something that you just said that I've been telling all my child life friends, like, we're experts at these hard conversations. I think that's what we do, right? Where people tell us all the time, I could never do what you do, you know, because we are the ones that are going in the room and we're talking about hard things. And that's what you can do for your friends and family if they're having a hard time talking to, because that's what we're the experts. We talk about taboo. We talk about tough.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, we're in it now. We're going to do it.